the native them don't steal the show. As they started telling more, it have a club all night, everything turn white, like powder is the goal. So if you know you can't take it, me beg you better don't fake it, cause you know this too real when we come out to play.
The history of Kairi under the Spanish government. I want to take you all to a very important part of this book. It's the schedule for colonization. Sorry, under the Spanish government, right? Promoted by Rom de St. Laurent and another guy. I want to get his name here, who actually put it into perspective. This was just before the last Spanish governor, Don Jose Mario and Chacon. His name is M. de la Forest. Yeah. A second paragraph stipulates, as usual, that any provision of law contrary to the schedule is and remains repealed, and that the officials of the American colonies and consular port consuls of France are bound to obey. For the understanding of the complete plan of colonization adopted by Spain, so there's the colonization plan we're getting into here now. We will recall, following the colonization schedule, as following it, the Black Code demanded by Rom de St. Laurent and promised by the 20-something fourth article of this schedule, although it is posted to something nearly 6 years old. It is in fact dated from Aranjuez on 31st of May 1789 and bore the title of Royal Cedula for the Protection of Slaves in the Spanish colonies, right? Contrary to what it was saying about slavery, right? This is the work of the new settlers in Kairi, and the colonizers' fine thought of making it the fate of slaves as little unfortunate as their conditions could allow it, because it has remained famous by his humanity. It was to M. Joseph de la Forest, a French colonist of Grenada, procurator syndic of the Bildu in 1785, that the honor of writing it fell to him. The honor of writing the schedule for protecting his slaves fell to him. This could not be entrusted to a more skillful and more philanthropic, right? The schedule is preceded by a long preamble. Just now, before we go over there, we're going to read this again, page 91. A natural and colored son of M. de la Forest, having inherited the property and humanitarian principles of his father, bequeathed in his absence of a direct heir his fortune and name to a young person or a young personal black slave from his workshop, right? So this and all telling you here again, these colonizers and them were colored, right? Go see who's colored now, right? So this long preamble where it said that ABW having been introduced into education, the treatment and the work of the esclaves or the slaves by their masters and the bursars, it is therefore necessary to remedy them, particularly at the time when, as a result of freedom granted to the Spanish subjects by royal order of the 28th of February of this same year, that would be 1785, right, of trading in blacks, or the prohibition of trading in blacks, probably, I'm not sure, but let me just continue. The number of these esclaves or slaves must increase considerably in America. Its system is divided into 4 titles as follows. Education. Any slaveholder, whether he is bound to teach them the precepts of the Roman Catholic religion in order to be able to, in the course of a year of their introduction, he is also required to give them rest on the days of holidays, except at harvest time. And on these days, they will have to hear mass. A priest will tell them, will be provided at their master's expense. And every day after during working hours, they will have to recite the rosary with devotion in the presence of the owner or his ikokome. Food and clothing. The master was obliged to feed slaves as well as the wives and children. Slave or free, the latter, until the age where it's possible to provide for their subsistence, which is fixed at 12 years for girls and 14 for boys, and no fixed rule can be established on the quantity and quality of their nourishment. This is quite contrary to what they told us about quote-unquote African slavery, right? We're going forward again. All right, and the work will be allocated according to their age and sex, which would be posted on the door of the town hall church of each district, so that no one may be ignorant of it. Occupation of slaves. The slaves will mainly work in the field in order to make their services profitable to their master and to the state. These work will be regulated by the magistrates and the syndics in the manner indicated in the preceding chapter, which they have the preceding chapter, but the preceding chapter. For 2 hours every day, they will be able to occupy themselves with work for their personal advantage. Wherever you hear that in any slavery discourse at any point in time in your life, anybody who listening, right? Slaves working for the personal advantage. And each year, they will receive their masters' dollars for the use of their families. Above 60 years of age and under 17, they will owe no service to these masters, and the women may only be used for work related with their sex. You understand? So you can't give woman no hard work to do even then. So this is contrary to what they told us about slavery. Right? Let me get some other things down here. Right? Dwellings and infirmary. The slaves will be housed in comfortable houses and likely to protect them from the inclemency of time. Men not married apart from women, and every house will be provided with beds, blankets, and other necessities. Says every man will have his bed, and every house may not contain more than 2 beds. So imagine you are 2,000 slaves or 100 slaves, right? That means 50 bed you gotta have, 50 house. So understand what this is telling you here is not what it was telling you slavery was. Another house will be assigned to the sick, and there they must receive from their master all the necessary. And if due to lack of space or proximity of a city, they are sent to the hospital, the master will be required to pay a daily pension for their care, and to be fixed by which was to be fixed by the magistrate, right? According to the method established in chapter U, and in case of death, he will have to repay the cost of the funeral. So these things is quite different to what we was told, right? They was paying slaves. We was told the word slave mean that you're not getting paid, just had to work for free. Right? So this is sounding more like indentured labor, ain't it? Right? Holding a firm. All right, marriage of slaves. 7. The master must oppose to cohabitation and to encourage marriage among its slaves, even when they wish to marry those belonging to other masters. And in the latter case, if the plantation are far from each other, to harm the purpose of marriage, the woman will be bought by the husband's master, and to not harm, probably, to a just valuation fixed by the 2 experienced arbitrators appointed by both parties, and in the event of disagreement by the 3rd arbitrator appointed by the other 2. And if the husband's master refused to buy the woman, the master of the woman will have the right to the husband's purchase. If you know what I mean? Obligations and punishments of slave, right? They were not to be brutalized and blood drawn from them, contrary to what we was taught. Let me just get that here, because I don't want to make this too long, and I have some juicy parts to get to. Boom, 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 boom. Right, so check this out. The latter pratio applied up to the number of 25 comts, probably 25 lashes, so or 25, whatever that is, so as not to cause any bruising or effusion of blood, and the various punishments cannot be imposed only by the master or his bursar. Severe penalties, same kind of thing. So it was basically like how they do in the court today, based on the severity based on the severity of the matter, is the severity of the punishment. But initially, you're not supposed to bruise or let the slave bleed, right? We going again, boom, boom, boom. How much money? Yeah, listen to this. If the masters or bursars are guilty of excessive punishment of their slaves, pushing them to the point of bruising or to the outpouring of their blood or mutilation of their limbs, they shall be, in addition to fines, prosecuted criminally and will be punished in proportion to their crime. And the slave shall be confiscated and sold to another master if he can work, and the amount of his sale be paid into the fine fund. And if no longer able to work, it cannot be sold. It will not be returned to its master, who will be required to provide him with something to be fixed by the magistrate for his subsistence and clothing throughout the remainder of his life, and payable every 3 months in advance. So one thing I'd like to point out, so from 1498 only up to the 1780s, we hear slave mentioned in the Spanish operations on the island. And this is the regulation for the Spanish slavery operating on the island in the 1780s, right? And this is not Spanish bringing slaves. This is Spanish allowing other, like the French, the Dutch, and the English, and whoever, who was bringing slaves, and and this is why they came up with now the regulation for slaves, or the schedule for colonization on Kairi, right? So up to now, they didn't bring no African slave that we could find yet. Right? Boom, boom, boom. Who mistreat it? All right, right. So check this out. Of those who mistreat slaves, as slaves must be punished only by masters or their stewards. Any other persons will not be able to mistreat, punish, injure, or kill without incurring the penalties imposed by law against those who commit something of these excess over free persons. And the master of the slave who has been thus ill-treated has the right to, in criminal trial, which will be defended by procurator protector of, imagine it had a procurator protector of slaves. It also have a slave list, and this is what I keep saying. For those of you who feel you come from Africa, why don't you get the slave list and find out which one of your ancestors that came in from Africa and see if you can trace that back? If you use this list, all of them coming from Europe, according to as we read earlier. List of slaves, the slave masters of slaves are required to provide the magistrate of their district. So this was a legal law thing running on the island, right? The magistrate, the law was involved, and they had to provide names to the magistrate of the slaves they own, with the mention of Taj or Ta, and of the sex of each of them, so that the notary of, that a notary back then, Arbolel de Ville or Devi, can enter them in a separate register, which would be held in the said town hall for this purpose. And each master whose slave will die or be absent is required to inform the magistrate within 3 days that he be noted in the register in order to avoid suspicion of murder. And if the master does not fulfill this obligation, he will be obliged to provide proof of abduction or the natural death of his slave, and failing on the basis of this evidence, let's not make sure my mic working, right? Yeah, failing that on the basis of this evidence, a lawsuit will be brought against him. Yehovah's. So this is the kind of thing that was running. No one told us this when we was going to school, and they still don't talk about this when they refer into this quote unquote I think they changed the name from Emancipation Day to African Liberation Day and all that type of. They don't speak on none of these things because it was fake. It's a farce. It never happened, right? As so far as we could read, from 1498 to 1780, there was no slaves. And from 1780 to 1845, when they introduced slaves, none of them came from Africa, right? And it was slaves that they was paying, so we calling them indentured laborers, right? We going again. Boom, boom, boom. They describe one of the here we go. Fines of tongues. Boom, boom, boom. There was another code. 1 second. Such is the set of colonization regulations adopted by Spain on the proposal of Rom de St. Laurent River. St. Lawrence River they have now. So we have a couple of typos, but it's Rom de St. Laurent, except for the Indians who are something stationed in their missions, probably stationed in their missions and subject to dual supervision of their parish priests and corregidors. These regulations, rules, regulation something, the different classes of colonial society or ruled the different colonial society at the time. Whites, colored men, and slaves, right? There's the first introduction of whites quite in the 1780s, right? We're hearing about whites and become the basis of our public law. They are remarkable for their liberality and meekness. The code noir, the liberal, the ambiguous code of morality. The code noir, above all contrasts admirably with the law, draconian reduction of the time on slaves. He makes also honor to the colonists who proposed it and to governor who adopted you or who adopted it. As for the schedule of colonization, the success it will soon achieve will testify of its high value. As usual, however, this will not fail to bring some disappointment among the large number of those who have spoken of it with praise. It has been said that by this means Spain had made a mistake of making Kairi a colony on whose fidelity she could not count. This very suspicious objection does not stand up not to be examined. Certainly it is fitting for nations to have their colonies peopled by their nationals, but they cannot obtain this desideratum. They have no identical choice that came from the abandonment of the regulations the abandonment and the reluctance by means of foreigners. Right? So now Spain was depopulated and could not reasonably think this in the 1780s. Spain was depopulated and could not reasonably think of to strip themselves of more inhabitants in order to send them to the Kairi. Nor could she bring herself to abandon it to give such a large colony. Condemn Gaelic, something repopulating the colonies by foreigners. It is also to condemn all conquests, since it is that any conquered country is necessarily populated by foreigners. Spain, moreover, calling foreigners and the colonization of Kairi she rightly does not count on her ability to satisfy foreign races and diverse societies to assimilate them. And these strangers who choose to live under the Spanish laws, did they not offer him in immunity or in something? And you deny more guarantees of fidelity than those whom it is necessary, happens to have to submit to those who their vain. What are they? From all these points of view, he is obliged to that Spain, by colonizing Kairi with a foreign population, not to colonize it with his nationals, has given proof of a true genius nator or governator or something like that. Right? So we'd stop here, but we could see as the quote-unquote black colonists was doing what they was doing alongside the white colonists, but they only came after when they was trying to colonize or people the colonies, right? Is when they brought them out, but the actual conquerors who was doing all that, as you can see here, natural born, colored son. So natural born, he born natural, so you have mother and father. Forrest, a colored son. All right? So when you think I'm making stuff up about who was the colonist, you now have the evidence right in front of your face. So that is where we'd stop today. and we continue on the next part of the series.